And welcome back. Barrier Free Living is nationally recognized as the first fully accessible emergency shelter for survivors of domestic violence with disabilities. Now, the organization recently received the National Crime Victim Service Award for professional innovation in victim services for its work in the victim services and criminal justice fields. Joining us now and sharing more details is the president and CEO of Barrier Free Living, Paul Feuerstein. And Paul, good to have you here with us. And congratulations. I mean, to have this kind of national honor, tell me what it really means to you.
Thank you so much. Well, for me, it is a recognition of the 36 years that we have been working with disabled victims of domestic violence. First, starting off in a mental health program that we ran. When I hired a deaf woman who, in the interview, said she had 13 years' experience with disabled victims of domestic violence, and my response internally was, "That's interesting. We don't have any." But I hired her. She taught us to ask the right questions, and we had a lot. And it turns out we learned it was the number one issue nationally of women with disabilities. And that started our passion for the field in terms of developing a program, setting up a separate community based domestic violence program, seeing the need for an accessible shelter because there were none at the time, and then developing shelter, and after that, developing 120 units of supportive housing in the Bronx.
And when we talk about supportive housing, much needed, and talk about the needs, because I think sometimes we're not so familiar with the needs when it comes to this particular matter. As you're doing the work and you've got your boots on the ground, what are you seeing as the primary needs in terms of services?
Having services that are sensitive to issues that come up with disability is very important. Um, People with disabilities oftentimes are considered ripe for abuse because they can be physically dependent or dependent in other ways, and that starts with the family of origin. There are times when the abusers are actually members of the family because of the attitude people have had for a long time about people with disabilities as sort of being second class citizens. And for a very long time, people did not associate domestic violence and people with disabilities. And so part of our role has been to raise up the issue nationally and locally to say this is a major issue for people with disabilities and they are in need of services. And particularly around the issue of children. There is a national bias against parents with disabilities in the child welfare system. And the general response is if a parent is disabled and there's nobody able-bodied to quote take care of the child in the home, they will take a child away at birth. And oftentimes, one of the big threats for an abuser, if the abuser is able-bodied, is if you report this, you will lose your children. And that has happened over and over and over again, where we've had to work with people to fight to get custody of their children back. The
What's
other piece,
mhm.
yep.
No, go ahead, keep going.
I,
I'm sorry. I want to cut you. Go
oh,
ahead.
okay. Okay. Another piece that's important, not just for people with disabilities, but also for others, is we're the only program in the country right now that uses occupational therapy interns to, to assess and develop activity of daily living. In other words, travel training, menu creation, learning how to shop in a grocery store, the day-to-day things that many of us learn from a very early age. There are people who have no experience doing that because part of domestic violence is about power and control and isolation. And one way to keep people isolated is not to let them go out and do their own shopping or let them go out and do things themselves. One abuser referred to his victim as a bird in a golden cage. And so, for somebody to break out of an abusive relationship requires not only our helping that person with the trauma they've experienced in the relationship, but it also means helping them then negotiate the systems that they've depended on, whether it be Social Security, a disability, or SSI, or Medicaid, food stamps, helping with all of those things to make sure that they are continuing to get those, even though they've moved out of their official residence and are in a safe place in shelter. And I think that's been a very important part of what we do, as well as assessing and then doing training with people to see what experiences they had. When we first worked with a group of deaf women in a regular shelter where we had a support team embedded in the shelter, we learned that not a single one of those deaf women knew how to travel on a city bus or subway by themselves. And so part of what we needed to do was travel training. And that's not for everybody. Everybody's different. You see one person with a disability, you've seen one person with a disability. Some people come and they have a great set of activity of daily living skills, others not so much. And there's many people who are somewhere in between.
Before we go, I want to talk again. You were nationally recognized April 29th by the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, for the work that you have done and continue to raise awareness. For somebody who may not be so familiar, what's the message that you would like to send? Because obviously you're thought of as an example and a credible place that people could be able to come and to get that supportive services and the things that you've done. But what's the message that you want to send to others?
Services are available, safety is available. Just because you have a disability and you feel like you're dependent on your abuser is no reason to not break out of that abusive situation and seek help. We are available. We have a chat line on our hotline with Secret Garden, our community based domestic violence services, which serves all 5 boroughs of New York City. Freedom House, our shelter, serves anybody. We've had people from 40 states, from Puerto Rico. We had 3 Paralympians from Ghana who are with us for a period of time. We accept anyone who is in a dangerous situation and where we know that our community where we're based, which is confidential, is a safe place for them to be, not a place where they would bump into their abuser or a relative or someone who would know them, and then the abuser would be able to find them again.
Yeah. Paul Feuerstein, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Again, congratulations on the great work that you're doing in promoting for survivors of domestic violence with disabilities. And as we said, this is something that many people don't know about, but you're doing the work, you're making a difference. We want to thank you for being with us here on Open.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate being with you.
All righty. Well, I want our viewers to know if you want more information, you can visit their website at bflnyc.org. Again, bflnyc.org. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We do have more Open coming up. We'll be on right back after this.